welcome back to the verdict. Just getting reactions, analyzing what transpired, and proffering solutions to what should we do to get it right moving forward. Well, Prof, you were making a point about what to do in context of what has been revealed.
So, in that context, it's only the president that can put his foot down and, if you like, decree the relationship between these three top.
Yeah, but do we have to decree it?
Well, I mean, that's why I did this. Put it in parentheses. Okay. I mean, well, that will be a language that he will probably most understand.
Okay, but what is wrong with us saying, for election purposes, all of them report to the chairman of INEC?
That's what should have been done. And I think that was what the law emphasized in saying that they should take instructions or guidance from INEC.
But if that is not happening,
it's
what
not
do we do? What do we do then?
And it is not likely to happen.
But is it expressly provided?
Sorry, he just said it's not likely to happen.
It's
Why?
not likely to happen until the person who can make it happen decides to make it happen. And that is the president, as I was saying. He must call them and say, so much is at stake. We have achieved considerable mileage in terms of our image. Okay? We cannot now afford, through some unreasonable actions, to lose what we have gained. And he is the man at whose table the buck stops.
You know, there's a lot of things that is put to question here.
Yes.
This is the fifth in the series of elections since 1999.
Yes.
It's not like we never know that these things are going to happen. And the reports upon reports have always shown that there are states to watch since 1999 until date. And it's not even new to us, this whole election fracas that we have since as far back as Professor Oyebode was talking about the 50s and all of that. So it's not new on us how these things will happen. Why are we finding it difficult to...
I think we simply have forgotten the civics lessons we've learned. See, there is a lead. One is that we lack what we call leadership. Leadership means that, as the president, for example, when he made the remark before the election season started, that he is going to ensure that there is transparent, free and fair elections in the country, right? Now, for this project, Chief of Army Staff, IGP, for this project, you report to the chairman of INEC, just for the election matters. If there is anything outside of that, it's still under my purview. Now, what would have changed anything? It's a sign of leadership to do that. And if that were to have happened, the two individuals would also cascade down their hierarchy, that for the election matters, this is the person that we listen to, and the execution becomes flawless. The problem we have is that we don't want to let go. Leadership is not always about giving me a command and me responding. Leadership is about basically clearly sharing the vision so that I can, on my own initiative, do what you want me to achieve, the higher goal. And that higher goal is the free and fair elections that the president espoused. So that's probably where we are. When we come to implementation, we still, are tentative. We are still under an authoritarian mindset, which we ought not to be.
So, Terry, in your submissions just now, have you considered also the security implications, if that were to be the case, in trying to solve these election problems that perhaps the Chief of Army Staff and the Inspector General of Police report to the INEC boss? But some will argue that that may infringe on the security apparatus for the country.
There are some national security issues that and that's why initially I was saying that the military ought not even to be in the picture, because that is the only matter that actually we can say that, you know, maybe during an election season, if we were attacked by a foreign force, what would happen? But it's just for the sake of that project that the interagency task force which Jega came up about should have listened to the chairman of INEC, just for that matter, nothing else. Anything to do with national security, and I would imagine that during the election season, not all police officers are supposed to be doing election duty only. There are some that are doing other things. They continue to do it. Intelligence outfit, they would continue to do what they're doing. Same thing with the military. It's not all military officers that would be assigned. If we did that, we would be a joke as a nation. So what I'm saying is that for the purpose of this project, here are the number of people that we have assigned, and here is what needs to be done to accomplish that task.
We won't be the first in Africa to do it anyway. So,
in any event, it's not as if the two gentlemen will be taking instructions,
exactly,
from the chairman of INEC. No. But they would have a better framework to carry out activities that will be in the overall interest of the nation,
right,
rather than egoistic perception of I am superior, you are superior, you are inferior. No, now. I think let us cast our minds back to what happens between the commissioners of police in the states and the state governors. The state governor is supposed to be the chief security officer of the state. But who of the state commissioners has ever taken instruction from the state governor, who is the chief security officer?
And usually the chairman of the state security.
Of course, agency, yes. So, I mean, it's not something, what we are discussing is not a recent occurrence. It has history.
It doesn't even, I don't know how to even put this, but the police has a DIG in charge of, DIG or AIG in charge of elections, and then the army also has a code of conduct for elections, and all of that. I don't know if any of that played any role in all of this so far.
Well, I doubt if anybody either remembers that those documents exist, or he thinks that if you have recourse to the documents. But these are the things that can enhance or debase our perception in the eyes of the
Let's
world.
take it to Samson. He also has a legal cap in this one. Well, Samson, looking at that section 29 of the Electoral Act now, because yes, indeed, it talks about the role of what INEC can do with security agencies on election day. But when you also say the buck stops at the table of the CEC, does that suggest that it's not expressly provided on who and what should be done concerning security on election day, section 29 notwithstanding?
Well, I think it's important to note that elections are conducted within a context. Elections are not conducted in isolation. And because the elections are conducted within a context, the context itself, ab initio, is regulated by other legislation. So when we look at the Electoral Act, we need to look at what other extant laws have provisions that impact on the context for which elections are conducted. And the Constitution is very, very clear on its relevant sections on the power that the President has to control our security agencies. The Armed Forces Act, as well as the Code of Conduct also issued by the Nigerian Army, the Police Act, all of these, it provides the responsibilities and the roles and the powers that each agencies have. We know that the president has the responsibility of providing for the welfare and security, and other subsidiary legislations draw their inspiration from the Constitution. And so by design, we need to note that. Secondly, if you also critically look at the law, it's very, very clear when it talks about the functions of INEC. But I just dare say, Chamberlain and colleagues in Lagos, I don't have confidence that this president, and who is our president, is committed to electoral reform. And if the president is interested in gaining my confidence and the confidence of Nigerians, then there's a lot that he needs to do. In the build-up to the elections, the president did make a commitment, not just to Nigerians, but to the international community, that he's committed to electoral reforms, and he wants to ensure that the process is credible. He had opportunities of assenting to legislations, the Electoral Act amendment, which he eventually didn't, he declined assent and said because of want of time. Now that the elections are over, we hope that time is no longer an issue because we've got 2023, but beyond that we've got Bayelsa and Kogi, and perhaps the president wants to reconsider his decision to assent to that particular bill. The second is the president constituted the Kenan Amani Committee, and you and I know how long it took the committee to conclude its work, and when 4 bills were transmitted to the National Assembly for consideration, and that was after the National Assembly had completed its own work on its amendment bill. So it does appear there was totally a lack of commitment, and that's why I don't have confidence that the president is committed to electoral reform. But he has emerged as a president. And if there's one legacy President Muhammadu Buhari would leave for Nigeria, and he wants to be remembered, is to ensure that, first, a post-election audit is conducted. And this post-election audit will require the cooperation of all the political parties, particularly the opposition parties, civil society, media, as well as the Electoral Commission. But there has to be a political will. I don't expect that the president should relegate the question of electoral reform until we get into 2023. If he's interested in leaving a legacy, then let's conduct a post-election audit. Let's look at our whole framework for elections and see how he can bequeath to Nigerians a very credible electoral process that would inspire the confidence. As you can see, there is a crisis of confidence, and that is exhibited by the turnout that we have seen. And so the president has an opportunity, and I just wish that those who are working with the president and his party will take electoral reform as a key agenda for this administration. And history would celebrate President Buhari if he does so.
Samson, if I may just butt in, because you've mentioned something very critical, and I think that our guests also here have also mentioned it, which is the political will. That seems to have come from, has a history on its own from 1999. But what is that element that we seem to miss in our political growth? And that very element of political will, such that we can use that to make a whole lot of difference. Is that political will an illusion? Or is it just is it mere semantics? Is it just a word on paper?
It's not a matter of semantics. Nigeria is a country where body language is very critical to policy making and public governance. And because you've got a man at the center of governance who represents this country and who has been voted by Nigerians, he is the institution that has so much powers to determine how the country is governed. And so his body language is critical. Why don't we believe that the president was committed to electoral reform? First, there's what they call the fierce urgency of now. And when you prioritize issues, when National Assembly transmit legislations to you, You don't wait until the expiration of 30 days as provided by the Constitution before you tell the National Assembly or Nigerians whether or not you are going to decline assent. If you think this is a very urgent issue, you expeditiously consider those issues. When we don't see these actions, it clearly shows that there's no political will. What I expect to see, that the president is committed to electoral reform. As soon as these elections, the results are actually counted, and you can start from now, because they have been caused by civil society and citizens, that the military and our security agencies should be held to account. Who has been penalized for the actions and infractions
Samson,
in
if
the
I could just jump
elections?
in
Over
and bring this
people,
question
over
in, my
300
apologies.
people were arrested.
If I could jump in and bring in this just before we go to break, I'm wondering, because if taking a look back at the amendment that was proposed by the Senate as at April 2017, 17 provisions in that particular one by the Senate. And the first 10 of those provisions talked about biometric voting, INEC, electoral officers, collation officers, transmission of results. Then from 11 up until 17, talked about political parties, how funding of political parties, the role of political parties, when a political candidate dies, what happens. But I didn't see any focus, particularly on what should be done about security. Doesn't that suggest to us that we're still missing a very vital point, even if the president has signed that particular one into law?
Well, again, it also boils down, and that's why in my initial comment, I said one of the things this election has done is to expose our commitment to democracy. We know that security is central to elections. And over time, we have seen how security agencies are instrumentalized to undermine the process. And it's about he who has control of the security agencies then probably is guaranteed 60% of victory at elections, which is not meant to be the case, because election security is very, very central. And so when we're looking at amendments, and that's why the National Assembly in 2015 proposed that amendment to limit the role of the military in elections, drawing from the experience in Ekiti elections, and then also clearly stating who has powers to request and deploy. I think that in the aftermath of these elections, we need to reconsider that amendment and see what kind of express provisions can we introduce to our Electoral Act as well as our Constitution and other subsidiary legislations to ensure that security agencies who are deployed for election security operations uphold the principles of patriotism and non-partisanship and professionalism, even though these principles are embedded in their codes of conduct. But we need some legislation, maybe somewhat higher than our electoral law, to guarantee that. But Chamberlain, you and I know that we can have the best of laws. We can have the best of laws, but the implementation thereof becomes a critical issue. And that is why the question around constitutionalism and rule of law is a topical issue, where you have individuals who are in the positions of power who don't have regard for democratic institutions of our law, and our law, you will continue to remain where we are. And that is where citizens, again, also have a role to play, because that demand has to be very, very strong, coming from the part of citizens in holding their leaders to account.
Well, Dr. Gary, if I could just ask you this one quickly as well. Do we take it for granted in the private sector that implementation is piece of cake? And so we expect it to happen in the public sector very easily?
In the private sector, it is about life or death, right? Because if you are not profitable, you die.
Yep.
And therefore, implementation becomes key and critical. And so any entity or firm that is not implementing or executing well enough, they may be left on the sidelines. Now, it is the same with institutions such as governance, because if the top-down approach doesn't work, it has to be a bottoms-up. So it could be demand-driven by the citizens, and that might probably be one of the things that may occur. That has its messiness, you know, the Arab Spring, you know, what's happening in some parts of the world right now, you know, countries demanding even the resignation of their presidents, etc., etc. Yeah. We do not want things to percolate there. But coming back to the political will issue, I think President Buhari has the luxury of history now, because this is his last and final elections. And so this is going to be the final term, right? Mm-hmm. One of the legacies he could leave would be something that the late Eradua mentioned when he came in and said that this was one of the most rigged elections, that he needed to do something about it. Okay. Now, we need to have a post-mortem or a post-electoral conversation, okay, and quickly come up with the electoral reforms, yes, that would include those elements that are lacking today.
We'll look at that a little more, right, when we come back in a moment. Stay with us.